Well, Meghan's really running through every single possible outlet as quick as she possibly can, it would seem. Nobody's coming back for a second dose of Meghan. The Cut, Variety, that businessy, podcasty thing. Nobody wants a second round of interviewing Meghan, and now she's found her way to Bloomberg for whatever reason. Why? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. This interview is titled Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, on Life and Business Beyond the Royal Spotlight. So, life and business, but they definitely packaged this as more business forward because the narrator, the interviewer, Emily, I believe the interviewer was, her introduction in the actual video says, we're going to get to know the businesswoman, Meghan, because we've heard from her that Meghan the divider, Meghan the this, Meghan the that. Now we're going to hear from Meghan the businesswoman. So this was packaged as a business interview. Huh? Well, we've seen how those usually go, haven't we? Absolutely no substance. But also, all these businessy interviews that she has done this year, the Time 100, on the Aspire podcast, sort of on the Jamie Kern-Lima podcast, the People Interview magazine, and now this Bloomberg magazine, the Fast Company interview, all of these things. It's a bit premature, isn't it? She's not some runaway success. Her products are not selling particularly well and certainly not reviewed very well. Her show has abysmal ratings and low performance. So what exactly are we here to hear about from her in regards to business? What is happening? This is all jumping the gun. Are we here to hear about marketing mistakes? Because she doesn't admit to them, but there is a plethora of bad examples that she has set. This is a lady who has spent over a year teasing jam, talking about jam, tickling jam, saying that jam is her jam, only to release a spread, a product labeled spread that looks like a sauce, that has the consistency of a sauce. It's a liquid. And she still calls it jam when she's talking or making an Instagram post or something. She's still calling it jam. It's not jam. It's not jam. Someone tell Meghan. It's not jam. One of the most basic business rules is that the product's name, packaging, and marketing need to prime the customer for what they are going to get. Set the expectations and then meet or exceed the expectations. Otherwise, you are failing. Their expectations before tasting should match the actual taste and texture and consistency of whatever the product is. Meghan's loose spread, doesn't. And if she can't even get that right, then, well, there's not much hope for a business interview. Now, is there? Quickly before we get into the interview, let me just say, as I have said before, releasing multiple things on the same day is a dumb idea. Generally speaking, you maybe want to have an interview come out the week of or a week before, but not on the same day that a show gets released. Releasing the products on the same day as the show makes sense, but only if it was teased well enough beforehand. Meghan didn't do any of this. She didn't prepare the consumer to buy the products on the day the show came out. The only thing that had a date published and teased and anticipation built, not that there was any anticipation, but in theory, in marketing, the anticipation was only built for the release of the show. And then she cluttered the news with this Bloomberg interview and releasing more products on that same day. And as I said before, I think that the reason for that in this case, this particular moment, this time, was because she wanted to stifle the negative reviews about With Love Meghan. She wanted to crowd the news so that there were some other things, some variety in the news, not just negative review after negative review about the show. I think that's why she crowded the news cycle with these things. But in general, it's a mistake to do that PR-wise. You want to sort of milk it. You want it to take up more than just one day in the news cycle. You want to spread it out a little bit. And interviews like the Bloomberg one and teasing that there's going to be products available can space that out a little bit and get you more press coverage. And that's kind of like free advertising. But she didn't do that, so I think that the confidence in the show and the products is beginning to fall behind the scenes. But let's begin by listening to this clip.
I know I do. Mm-hmm. And if you know me, you know that I do. There really is a lot of value to when you anchor into your own knowing, then you're telling your own story. Yeah. You're telling your own story and how you show up in the world, what you do. You actually don't need to say anything. You can show who you are.
One of the first questions, own your own story, knowing your own story, not needing to say it out loud, sort of a vibe here. This is rich coming from Meghan Markle, is it not? Someone who has spent over 5 years just telling people things and working tirelessly to convince the public of certain things with her words. And this that she's said is actually true, that if you're being honest, you don't need to prove things. And you don't need to prove anything to anybody or explain things to people because you are being honest and just, this is the truth. It is the truth. I mean, like, what more can I say? But that's not how Meghan and Harry have been living, and that's not what they have demonstrated. Maybe she's projecting a little bit. Maybe she has either realized or has heard how people talk about with Catherine, that Catherine, the Princess of Wales, seems so genuine and authentic. She's not out there telling people how she is or who she is or how they should think about her or what she likes and things like that. She's just doing it. She's just living, and her values and what seems important to her comes through in her choices and how she lives. And so people feel like she's very authentic and feel like they can believe these things about her. And so Meghan maybe is latching onto this because she thinks that this will help. I don't know. Maybe she's like, well, everybody believes Catherine, and Catherine never says anything and never explains anything. So maybe Meghan is trying to take that on and is trying to pretend and wants you to think that she's not explaining anything to anybody because she owns her story or whatever. I don't know. She wants you to forget all that she said all the time. And she wants you to forget that that's one of the problems with her, that she's telling you this is who she is, but her actions and the history show us something else entirely. I have a playlist of all of her previous interviews broken down and analyzed, both her print interviews and video ones, so go check it out. I'll link the playlist up here, and I'll try to remember to link it at the end of today's video as well if you would like some more examples of previous versions of Meghan. But that is why people don't see Meghan as authentic. She's always telling us how she is and who she is and how she wants to come across. Right now, it's a super nice, super kind, successful business lady who's just bringing things to you from her heart and her home. But in reality, it's just not that way. And it doesn't match previous versions of Meghan, and it doesn't match reality. But next, early in this interview, can you believe it? They go back to the dish soap story and her 11-year-old self, which I am really surprised by, that anybody would want to put this and include this in their interview. I'm kind of shocked, Bloomberg. The dish soap letters, for the record, were an assignment across many elementary schools that year. It was not unique to Meghan. Meghan, because her dad had connections in TV shows, got her class on camera, but the assignment itself was a nationwide thing. Her answers and her describing this moment in her life are just as pompous as usual, so I will spare you clips of this moment.
Trying to be relatable while also being a duchess.
No, I don't find, I'm just being myself. So I think probably it was different.
Next, Meghan does a really bad job of answering this question about being a duchess and whether or not that kind of gets in the way of being relatable. I will try to insert a clip here, but if it gets copyright flagged or something like that, I will have to cut it out. So please forgive me if it disappears off the video.
Several years ago, where I couldn't be as vocal and I had to wear nude pantyhose all the time. Let's be honest, that was not very myself. I hadn't seen pantyhose since movies in the 80s.
She does a terrible job. She basically says that wearing pantyhose was very inauthentic when she was with the royal family, but that in general, being a duchess does not interfere with her relatability at all. And this is a terrible way to answer the question, first off, because there is an inherent catch-22 here, and pretending like there's not one is just stupid and manipulative as well. It comes across as disingenuous. This shows us that she's trying to answer the question in a way that she thinks will win her points with the public rather than the reality. The reality is that, of course, there is a catch-22. Of course, there is a conflict between coming across as relatable and being a duchess and using your duchess title every chance you get. And she lives a very privileged life, even if she wasn't a duchess. Celebrities are being faced with this right now, that their relatability has diminished with social media and things like that, because people see just how privileged their lives are, how wealthy they are, how easy things are for them, how their houses are huge and beautifully decorated and always clean because they have a maid. And then they post things on social media to try to be relatable, and it doesn't mesh. And people right now in culture are much more familiar with that. And the narrative is getting stronger around it for mental health purposes of like, hey, you need to understand that these people you follow on social media are editing and getting the perfect shot and working really hard to make things look perfect, and they have a lot of help, and celebrities have fitness trainers and home cooks and are buying the healthiest of ingredients and eating the cleanest they possibly can. And that's how they are staying in shape. It's not just as easy as they say it is. These types of things that there's been a discussion in culture lately of calling out the more realistic side of what you see on social media has sort of bled into celebrity, where celebrities are no longer coming across as relatable as maybe people wish they did or as they used to, because there is a big discrepancy. Inherently, they are not relatable to the general public just by the fact that they are famous and wealthy. And so that is present with Meghan Markle in and of itself, even without the title, which is so far removed from meaningful for Meghan now that she's not a working royal. She's not even living in the UK. So it doesn't really matter that she's a Duchess of Sussex title. It doesn't really matter anymore. It's more so the lifestyle that makes her not relatable. But pretending like it doesn't, and going about and using your title and then pretending like that doesn't inhibit your relatability, is foolish. Because she does live a very privileged life. She could have here tapped into the fact that she married into the title. That because it wasn't a title she was born with, she wasn't raised with these things, it doesn't feel like it changed her, even though her circumstances changed, or something of that nature. But to pretend like it doesn't affect relatability feels manipulative and contrived and is unrealistic. Also, she says that wearing pantyhose was something that felt really inauthentic, which is the stupidest answer I've ever heard. And pantyhose have benefits. They help you create a really smooth line. They will blend over and hide panty lines. If you buy tummy control ones, they help smooth over your belly area. Even if you're super thin and skinny, it just creates a smoother base. It blends over your belly button, for example. We saw countless occasions where Meghan Markle's belly button was visible under her dresses, panty lines, just everything looked messy. And it broke up the lines of these outfits that she was wearing, and it made them look cheap and tacky. So having a smooth finish is really important, and pantyhose or nylons, whatever you call them, tights, really, really help to achieve that. And it's an easy thing to wear. Also, why are you so against wearing nylons in a professional scenario? A little bit questionable when it comes to etiquette. But anyway, in response to criticisms of her show, Meghan basically said that she knew who she was talking to. She found her audience, and her audience and her partners at Netflix love the show. I'll try to play a clip for you here.
I think I knew who I was trying to meet. And so if you know your audience, you know your demographic, well, they love the show. And my partners love the show, and that's why we have a season 2.
I don't think even she believes that, though. Look, you can see plainly. Based on ratings and reviews, most people disliked the show. It's just a fact, an unfortunate fact for her, but a fact nonetheless. And to be fair, that must sting. It must. But if she had leaned into it and said that she's passionate about it anyway, and she wants to continue to improve, she believes in the show, that she hopes that people will find something they like about the show, or that she hopes that it connects to the people who she made the show for, people who are interested in the same things, like something like that. It wouldn't look like complete and utter denial, and it would have given a little bit of a backbone to the show's intention. Or even to acknowledge some of the criticism and say that she is eager to continue to improve, or that this was her first try at doing something like this. Anything more human. But no, just the people who like the show are the only ones I care about, basically, and everybody else is wrong. They're just trying to pay their bills. When asked about comparisons to glorifying tradwifery, which I think is a little bit of a weird question. I feel like that was a little bit last year, but I don't know. I'm not super online, so maybe I'm wrong. But Meghan skirts around this question a little bit, which I found an odd approach. The whole tradwife thing is really just an internet fad, like everything else, and she could have just leaned into that I feel like that's just kind of a fad. I don't think that really makes sense for my show or something like that. But when asked, how do you respond to those who say you're glorifying being a tradwife? To be fair, I do think the way that Meghan answered this is fine, because she said there's no judgment on anyone who lives that way, but there is an in-between, and I would agree. We as an internet culture need to stop eagerly categorizing things so blatantly and quickly and so harshly. I personally, for example, would prefer far and away to be a stay-at-home mom and spend my days cooking and cleaning and baking and taking care of my kids and doting on my children and my pets and having family time and just taking care of my house and home. That would be my favorite thing to do instead of work. And some people might say that that's tradwife territory. But to me, that's just normal life and what I would prefer to do. And it has nothing to do with this whole loaded internet thing that just creates this whole strange narrative and identity on its own that's not nuanced at all. I would not call it that. And so I think it's important to remember that labels that are circulating in internet fads don't translate into real life well at all. So I feel like it was also kind of a silly question to ask her. But ultimately, Meghan loves to tell people how hard she works, and this would have been the perfect choice to point out that she's choosing to work while her kids were little, which I wouldn't if I were her, but that's a different discussion. And that inherently cannot be tradwifery, right? If you are spending your days working and you're creating a show and you're doing a show and you're blah, 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 this asEver nonsense. Even though we know Meghan has a lot of help and she's not as involved as she likes to say she is, this was her chance to be well, I spend a lot of time working on this, so how would that be tradwifing if I'm working? This is a job, sort of. Moving on. On to asEver. She says that Meghan refused to share sales figures for asEver, which makes sense. I'm not surprised. The Meg cannot out herself as a microbatcher. Her sold-out image would crumble. But Meghan says that she went from a few thousand units to 1 million units. Revealing. So that means that those initial drops were indeed micro drops. But remember what we've discussed. Those early drops of products were skewed due to the press, quite frankly. Publications and independent journalists, commentators all wanted to be able to make a review. So a great percentage of initial sales were due to this, which is a one-off. To scale based on the first few drops is a huge mistake, because those are not indicative of sustained interest. The customer base was smaller than the sales initially showed. But that explains why the products are not moving significantly at this moment. When asked about her pricing, she says that she wants it to be attainable. And the price point for her hero product, Jam, her words, being $9, you would think she's talking about a cure for cancer, for goodness sakes. She acts like it is so significant and world-changing for her jam to be only $9. When for half the price, you can get better jam at the store that's actual jam, not loose spread. Ugh. And you don't have to pay shipping. And that's the exact problem with her products. They're overpriced, plus you have to pay shipping, plus it's inconvenient to order them. They're not tasty. At what point does it just not become worth it to the consumer? pretty early on. Pretty quickly, it becomes not worth it. Emily asks Meghan what she wants asEver to be as a brand. Like, what is your vision? She says that she eventually wants it to get into retail stores where people can shop for it in person and be worldwide. And she's very confident in this. But I think the initial format of this business, being direct to consumer, being so messy, having the problems with Love Meghan, and already seeing lower interest, that she may have lost momentum for this goal. Launching with at least one brick and mortar access point probably would have been the smarter way to go about things. When asked about rebranding, in the context of, is With Love Meghan a rebrand for you? Meg shoots this down and says, no, this is how I have always been, which we know is not true. I beg to differ. But she mentions being on Instagram as a mark of authenticity. And I really wish one of these interviewers would ask her point blank, how do you reconcile being on Instagram, owned by Meta, with your stance against Meta stopping their fact-checking initiatives? You put out a pointed letter about it, she and Harry did, condemning Meta for removing fact-checking from their platforms. They spoke out strongly against that decision. They also have claimed to have a strong stance against social media policies that allow for harms to children, online bullying, things like that. They support anti-online bullying. They are casually, occasionally trying to come across, or at least look like, they campaign for a safer online world for children. How does Meghan, I wish the interviewer would ask her, how do you reconcile those two conflicting interests? How does that sit with you, Meg? Because it looks incredibly hypocritical. It seems like she doesn't actually care about the online initiatives because she's going ahead and using Instagram to make money and thereby make Instagram money, Meta money, by being on the platform. So where is her principles really? Where are her ethics in this dynamic? Either she doesn't actually care enough about the online bullying and social media being bad or not doing enough to protect children, or she's willing to sacrifice her principles to make money on Instagram. I really wish somebody would ask her to make that make sense for me. When asked about critics amongst press and online, she distances herself from the popular narratives and says that there is a caricature of her and that's what gets criticized. It's not her. It's not real life Meghan that gets criticized. It's this caricature in the media that gets criticized. Media Meghan is the one people hate, not Meghan. Which is super narcissistic. But to be completely fair and balanced, to an extent that is true for all public figures. We don't know these people in real life. We do not know them. But we know what they say to the world. What they put out in the world through their own mouths and actions is what people are basing their decisions and character judgments on for Meghan Markle. And Meghan and Harry put themselves out there a lot, and they show the world who they are frequently. And that's what people judge on. It's not just hearsay and tabloids and rumors that people are deciding Meghan is questionable with her character. It's what she actually says and does herself, direct to the camera, direct to the media, in interviews and shows and Oprah. That's where people found Meghan to be making mistakes and be not very good of a person. And although the whole, yes, there can be a narrative that runs away from somebody or a slightly different image than one that's realistic in the media than the person themselves, yes, true. It would be beyond refreshing, and it is impossible to ignore that she has neglected to do this. It would be refreshing to hear her acknowledge that she spoke ill of people, and thus she understands why people feel the way they do about her, or that she lied, or that she made mistakes. Even just that, even just saying, I've made a lot of mistakes, and it has affected my public image in a way that lends itself to criticism. But I am trying to repair that, or I'm trying to make amends or something. To just always push every single critique out and swat it away from herself and onto the other party, to flip it and turn it around and push it back out. Like, oh no, actually that's you who has the problem. In every single scenario is a well-established pattern. It's frustrating, and it's also a big sign of narcissism. You tell the narcissistic person that you're tired of them always showing up late when you make plans to go to dinner or something, and they're late every single time. And they push it back out onto you and are like, well, you never do it at a time that's convenient for me, and I have this going on, and why don't you make it a different time then? Meghan is not, in this scenario, the way that what she's doing here is manipulating the narrative. She is not criticized because of valid reasons. No, it's because of a made-up caricature about her. In reality, though, she is criticized because of her own actions and words. In South Africa, on Oprah, in Netflix, in interviews, on archetypes, behaviors that we've watched her being pushy and bossy to Harry and others, copying Princess Diana, weird stuff, lies that we have watched come out of her face. No one made her do that. That's her. That's her actions, her choices, her words. That's what she's being criticized for. But her narcissistic inability to understand that is flipping it and finding a way to twist it to, no, that's just a caricature. That's all the media twisting things around. Even though that's not true. That's what she's saying because she's trying to manipulate the narrative. Or also in this interview, she pushed the criticisms about her show away and said that it makes people money to make a negative review. That's the only reason why there's negative reviews, because that's what makes money. They're incentivized to be negative about my show. Therefore, they don't actually find it to be a terrible show. They're secretly going home and making one pot pasta. Absolutely not. I did not, for the record. That pasta looked gross.
Negative voices, are they saying negative things and then secretly going home and making single skillet spaghetti? Possibly.
But that minimizes the negative reviews and the voice of criticisms as having an ulterior motive while protecting her ego and manipulating the narrative of, maybe a casual viewer would be like, maybe she's right. Maybe some people are just doing it for that. When in reality, people, even completely neutral reviewers on Rotten Tomatoes, for example, a plethora of professional reviewers reviewed it negatively because the shows just sucked. It just did. That's just a fact, okay? Facts are facts. But more importantly, this allows the narcissism, the ego, to say, no, they're just saying these things because they're incentivized. They don't actually think my show sucks. When in reality, the fact is that her shows and her recipes didn't connect with the public. They weren't very good. And so no, it's not about money, Meghan, or spinning a negative narrative for clickbait. It's actually you, your show, your products, your lies, your actions, and you that earned the criticisms you get. The hypocrisy here doesn't really connect for her, I don't think. She put her in-laws on blast, on TV, of all places, full of lies to boot. How does she not get the gravity of the things that she has done since 2019? It's mind-blowing, really. But for this interview that was meant to be focused on business, we have now veered completely off course. She's asking about Meghan's name, whether she uses AI, what she thinks about AI, social media, whether she feels like she has to be perfect all the time, whether she can go incognito in Montecito. What are we doing here? Why is this the interview? Where are the business questions? The literal title and the intro from Emily, the interviewer, was The Businesswoman. We're talking about the businesswoman here. How are any of these things relevant? This is what happens every time Meghan has a business interview because she's not a businesswoman. At the end of the interview, she's asked one thing that she wishes people could know about her. And she marinates on this for a very long time. And then she gives the same answer that we've heard before, which is, I'm a real person. There's a real person behind here.
One thing. Oh, gosh. What's the one thing? Oh, gosh. I think when I sit with it for a second here, I just want people to know that I'm a real person.
And this was the chance. She should have and could have said, I'm a real person and I have made mistakes, but I am growing. I've made amends, whatever. But instead, she says things like, I'm a real person. I have to go and do school pickup. around parents who are seeing these things in the media about me, and then I'm seeing them face to face at school pickup. I have friends, real life friends, who are reading these things about me in the press, and they shouldn't have to because I'm a real lady.
No, my friends have to read those things. Like, I have real best friends, the same one since I was 17. Like, I'm a real mom.
So instead of taking any accountability for where she's found herself, that people in her real life and community have changed their view of her or have preconceived notions about her because of the constant stuff in the press outing her as negative or not so great, the stuff that she's done herself. She's not liking the consequences of her actions, is what that means. She, instead of getting that she has brought this on herself, starting with South Africa and Oprah and Netflix and all of the interviews, instead of getting the fact that she has put this stuff out there and made these mistakes and lied about people on TV, on the public stage, and that has real life consequences in that people you meet will know about this stuff and may not want to be friends with you or your kids. Instead of getting that and connecting those dots, she thinks the media just simply shouldn't be reporting on these things. The criticisms shouldn't be happening to her because it's affecting her negatively in her real life because she's a real lady.
I choose to go and do school pickup and drop off, but I do that under a landscape that is created that forgets that I'm a real person.
She is in a landscape of unpopularity and disapproval because of her actions and choices. And yes, real people do make mistakes, and real people shouldn't always be forced to live in the space of their mistakes, to live in that moment of time forevermore and shamed for eternity. Some should, but not everyone every time. The difference here is that Meghan and Harry have never apologized. For goodness sakes, actors or celebrities who make mistakes, whether it be serious like a DUI or a little bit more frivolous like a questionable tweet, they apologize publicly. They hide out for a little while and then everyone moves on. Acknowledging that you've made mistakes, you know why they were mistakes, goes a long way towards people feeling like you are real, relatable, and normal, and can often bring you out of this intense unlikability and scrutiny. And I've said it so many times, this is a step you cannot skip in the public eye, with press relations, with public image. You cannot skip the sorry. Meghan and Harry have been trying for years now to take a giant leap, skipping over the whole apology part, taking responsibility for their actions and those who are newer to the Sussex saga, the long and twisted story. Let me just briefly explain the elements to this, the cold hard facts. Not conjecture, not rumors, not things that people talked about, oh, I bet this happened, or I think this happened, or conspiracy theories, or anything not provable. Hard facts that we have here, okay? Meghan had to apologize to a judge for lying in court that she was not feeding stories to Omid Scobie when she was. Meghan and Harry lied 19 times. Factual inaccuracies, straight up lies, straight up fibs, mischaracterized and took things out of context, or lied by omission another 21 or more times on Oprah. In Netflix, they doubled down on every single one of those lies and had a whole new batch of manipulations to the truth. Plus, there was Spare and various other interviews with their own set of lies, mischaracterizations, taking things out of context, etc. And there were real people on the other side of this. Specific reporters and journalists whose jobs were to report on Harry and Meghan got them put in Harry and Meghan's firing line. Royal family members like King Charles, Prince William, Catherine, Princess of Wales, staff that worked for the royal family, namely Angela Kelly and others. The list goes on. What about these real people whose families and friends and coworkers and the entire world read headlines that Harry and Meghan created with lies? What about their real humanness, Meghan? What about them being real people and you lying about them and attacking them on the world stage? Did she forget?
My kids will see those magazines and we all know mom's gossip.
Did she forget that she attacked real people? Some of them just simply employees of the royal family doing their job. And this doesn't include all the other stories that we can't necessarily point to and say we have evidence that this is another lie. This doesn't include things where Meghan just did something super shady or said something that was a contradiction to something previous or did something really inconsistent. This is just counting the stuff where there is undisputed evidence that Harry and Meghan lied and hurt real people with those lies and never apologized and never corrected the narrative. They never came out and corrected the Oprah narrative. Harry half-assed a retraction of that in a Tom Bradby interview 3 years later. But it was not a full correction, a proper fix. It wasn't. Meghan is not innocent, and she is not stupid. She and Harry will not be able to overcome the public dislike until they apologize for this and acknowledge their mistakes. But what do you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you're curious about the Sussex saga, check out this playlist. It's long, but it covers the history of this whole story, if you're interested. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a very happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye.